Hi, I'm Jerry Garrett, and I'm standing at the entrance to Bellefontaine Cemetery, a 314-acre historic cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri. This is where William Clark is buried, as well as many of his family members and many people that he knew. I'm standing at the bust of William Clark at the obelisk marker at his grave. Clark died in 1838, and Bellefontaine Cemetery was started in 1849, with the first burial being in 1850, which was a decade or more following Clark's death. So Clark was originally buried on his nephew, John O'Fallon's property. Most people believe that first burial occurred just south of here in a city park called O'Fallon Park. There have also been things found of cemeteries downtown, one of which was named the O'Fallon Burial Ground. So I'm of a minority that questions where Clark's first grave was. But regardless of where the first grave was, in 1860, Clark again died in 1838. The remains of Clark and his family members and the O'Fallon property were reinterred here in Bellefontaine Cemetery. That included the grave of William Clark, his second wife, Harriet, three of his sons. Clark's youngest son, who was 14 years old when Clark died, left in his will money for a monument for his father, and that's what we see today, which was built and finished and dedicated in 1904. 1904 is sort of the high water mark for the city of St. Louis, because it was in that year that the city, the nation, and even the world celebrated the Louisiana Purchase, and what we call the World's Fair was technically the Louisiana Purchase Exposition. So it was during that time that the marker was rededicated, and there were all kinds of significant glitterati who were here for the dedication. I'm standing at the grave of Meriwether Lewis Clark, the first son of William Clark. The Clark family tradition was that the first son would be named Jonathan or John. In fact, William Clark's oldest brother was named Jonathan, and the letters that William Clark wrote to his brother became the basis for the book edited by Jim Holmberg of Dear Brother, being addressed to his brother Jonathan. Clark broke that tradition, family tradition, by naming his first child, his first son, after his friend Meriwether Lewis. The child was born in January of '09. Before Christmas of '09, Lewis will have died on the Natchez Trace, so the two never really met each other. I'm standing at the grave of Jefferson Carney Clark, a younger son of William Clark, the child of Clark's second marriage. Jefferson Carney Clark had no children, lived out his life in New York City, and was the donor of the money for the Clark Monument. I'm standing at the grave of Lewis Wilson, whose tombstone describes him as a faithful retainer of the family, and Emmeline Payne, a good and faithful servant. It's difficult to put the records together, but in Clark's will, he gives to his sons, each of his sons, some of his slaves. And the names Emily, Emmeline, these two individuals who lived in the family of George Rogers Hancock Clark, one of Clark's sons, these may have been slaves of Clark's that are buried here on the Clark plot. I'm standing at the grave of Julia Clark Voorhees, one of Clark's grandchildren. And an interesting thing to me is that Clark never knew any of his grandchildren. They were all born after his death. She was the daughter of his son, George Rogers Hancock Clark, and she received from her father the various Clark souvenirs that had worked down through her father. And then her step-uncle, Jefferson Carney Clark, who had no children, she also inherited his family papers, so she became the principal recipient of Clark archival materials. She gifted those to the Missouri Historical Society and include wonderful things related to Clark, his life, and especially to the expedition, making the Missouri Historical Society the second most significant repository of expedition material. The most significant, of course, being the American Philosophical Association in Philadelphia. She gifted the gift in honor of her daughter, who had predeceased her, Eleanor. So the gift on the website is often referred to, I think, as the Eleanor Voorhees gift, but it was given by her mother, Julia.